Hey everyone, welcome to the Book Barn. I'm Laisha.
And I'm Lainey.
And boy, do we have a treat for you today. It's our very first author interview.
Yay! We had the great pleasure of speaking with author Corrin DaCosta, who released her debut novel, Dead Daddy Issues, in July of 2024. And we are so excited to share that conversation with our listeners.
So excited to share. But Lainey, first, this book, it was fascinating.
Oh my goodness. It had me intrigued from the very beginning. I'm thinking it was about chapter 3 when I just didn't want to put the book down.
Well, I thought it was a really interesting portrait of a middle-aged tarot reader. And I would wager that not very many books can claim that.
Right? It was thought-provoking, and it was really like nothing I had ever read.
Well, the protagonist, Leah Sparks, has some pretty complicated relationships.
Yes, she does. She has a dysfunctional family. Her parents had a messy divorce years ago. She herself is divorced, and her ex-husband has custody of her kids. She has a wild and crazy best friend, and she has a strained relationship with her kids, her siblings, her mother, and especially her father, Leo.
So the story opens with a vivid description of Leah at her father's funeral. She's always believed in fate, but now, as she buries her father, she can't help but think that he might still be alive if she hadn't interfered with his fate. All she wanted was to fix her family and create a better future with her kids. But now she's carrying around some heavy guilt, and she finds herself in a Catholic confessional.
Oh, yes.
It's through her confessions that we learn about her story. And what a unique way to narrate the book.
Oh, I totally agree. So she tells about going back to her hometown to make things right with her children. And her ex-husband makes it extremely difficult. I didn't like him. She has trouble finding and keeping a job. That part was sad. And then, out of the blue, her estranged father shows up looking to make amends. And she lets him move in, which eventually leads to her world crumbling around her. She starts to question fate and makes unthinkable decisions for her family's future.
The book is Dead Daddy Issues by Corrin DaCosta, and here's our conversation with Corrin.
Corrin DaCosta, we want to thank you for being here with us in the Book Barn.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so delighted.
Lainey and I are excited to learn more about you and about your debut novel, Dead Daddy Issues. So your bio says that you were raised in a picturesque town in Washington State. So tell us about your hometown.
Oh, yeah. So it was really small. Most people are familiar with Washington State. And then, of course, Seattle is the biggest landmark. And Chelan is in north central Washington. So it's east from Seattle at about 3 hours or so of a drive. And it's over the Cascade Mountains. And so it's very different from Seattle and what people know of as Washington. In Chelan, it's deserty, but it's also got a lake in it, 55-mile long, beautiful glacier-fed lake. And so it's really a place for a lot of tourism as well, but super small. I think the population now is about 4,000 people. And when I was growing up, it was about 3,000. So, you kind of knew everyone. And small schools.
So as a child growing up there, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I had no idea. I was not one of those kids that knew for sure at all. I don't know how many people know for sure what they want to do when they're younger. I think for me, it was only as I got older that I was able to reflect back on my younger years and see natural aptitude and natural passions, if you will, that kind of blossomed for me later in life. But I had no idea.
So when did you first decide that you wanted to be an author?
Well, the writing thing, I do have a thread of writing through my whole life. I just didn't see it, or maybe I didn't recognize it as a potential way to have a profession and or that sort of thing. Maybe that didn't seem attainable. But, as a second grader, I got to attend a writers' conference. And then again, as a fifth grader, I was chosen to do this fabulous young person's writers' conference. And they still hold it today. And it's in a place called Fort Worden, which is at Port Townsend, so Washington State. And you go there, and for a week, it's in the summer, and you get to study with authors, take classes, do creative writing, just everything you can think of, talk to poets, talk about even publishing, how to write, all of these different things. So that was a really important time for me as a young person. And so that did stay with me. And I was always a natural writer. I would write poetry, as many writers do in high school, often about boys, it's like love interest, that sort of thing. And I can still remember having this really amazing moment. I was in sixth grade and I was thinking about a boy, and then just right away this poem came to me and I wrote it down within seconds. And so for me, poetry and writing has often been like that. So just a way to express emotion, and also comes to me in a very inspirational sort of way,
Yeah.
And so that was with me all throughout when I was growing up. But I would say it was my early 30s that I started to get more serious about writing. And I did what many people do. I started a blog, and I would share poetry and different musings, that sort of thing. I wrote it under the name Off the Raven's Tongue. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. And then simultaneously, I attempted to start my first book. And that was probably like a decade of me trying to do that and hitting roadblocks. And it wasn't until the past couple of years that I got really serious. And I signed up with, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's a company called The Novelry, and they're out of the UK. I don't know if you guys know that.
No,
I know.
no.
They're really great. And so I was able to, over the internet, take classes on writing. And so I signed up for their finished manuscript package, if you will. And what was so cool about that is that for the first time, even though I'd had this internal drive to write and I tried it and hit roadblocks, it was the first time that I was learning that this happens to every writer. For example, your first draft is going to be terrible. Everyone hates it. I had no idea. I truly thought.
You thought you were just going to write a book, huh?
Yeah, I thought if it wasn't perfect on my first draft, then I had no business doing it.
Oh.
I really did, which is such a bummer. But I am so grateful that I got to really have my hand held, if you will, and shown that, really kind of the nuts and bolts of the process, the behind the scenes for even really accomplished writers and how that process looks for them. And that was really liberating.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time I was really able to work through those hurdles that I'd come up against over the years. And I was able to complete my first novel, which we now know is Dead Daddy Issues.
Oh, it was so good.
Oh, thank you for reading it.
Yeah. So tell us about your writing process. I mean, do you work from an outline? Did you know the beginning or the middle, the end, everything before you actually started? Or were the characters and the plot just developed as you went? I mean, I'm sure you had an idea, but fill us in.
Mm-hmm. I did know some of it, but it really was my first time really writing a book from start to finish. So there was a bit of experimentation.
Right.
So what I found when I started writing was I I had an idea and I knew bits and pieces. I knew landmarks of the story, if you will. And I thought I knew the ending. And over time, it would shift and change. So, what I found was that I love, and even now, I love to have these landmarks of a story, but also allow space for the unknown to pop up within the storytelling process. And so I had a mixture of both of those elements. And the writing process would shift for me. In my first draft, it was really kind of stream of consciousness. And I would spend whole days, 12 hours, middle of the night. It was super creative, so fun. And then later down the road, when I was doing editing, it was much more structured and that sort of thing. So I think I know now for subsequent books that yes, I will definitely have these landmarks and some outlining. And I think I may even do more outlining than I did in the first book, but I still want to leave that space because uh, it's so interesting how stories will have a life of their own beyond what you think it's going to be as the author.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so fascinating to hear how authors come about. I know that some have said, like their characters they just learn who they are as they go. And I'm sure you had a little bit of that too.
Yes. And of course, I don't want to give the ending away.
Right.
Yes.
So I won't. I'm kind of biting my tongue a little bit. But what I can say is I thought I knew the ending at the beginning. And as I started writing it, I realized that I don't know if it was about a third of the way through that the story had a different ending.
Oh.
And I almost was in resistance to it. It was like, hey, this is not what I have planned. And it was interesting how, as I was writing it, I would have, in the beginning of the book, I had put in an element that, unbeknownst to me at the time, would be perfectly set up to help that orchestration of this previously unknown ending come together. And so there were things like that, like this magic of it, that I really had fun, just being a part of.
Yeah.
We did on the front end of this podcast, we're going to give the listeners a quick summary, no spoilers, but we'd kind of like to hear you tell us what you feel like you can tell us about dead daddy issues.
Oh, yeah. At its core, Dead Daddy Issues is a family saga. And it's really focusing on the reverberating and multi-generational effects of family dysfunction. And in this book, it focuses most specifically on the father-daughter relationship and ultimately their individual paths and how they both want to find healing and how at times they clash and at times they kind of come together.
Right.
So I would call it a multi-generational saga. So the main character follows tarot reader Leah Sparks. And the book opens up and she's at her father's funeral. And it's known that she feels guilt and some sort of intensity about something that's happened surrounding his death. And she ends up at a Catholic confessional and tells her story to a priest and ends up going back in time to when she had returned to her conservative hometown, essentially to reconnect with her teenage kids and set their future right. At that same time, her estranged father shows up and he's got his own version of how that looks. He's back there to fix his past. And they definitely clash on that. They come together as well. And so it goes through all of that drama. And it's interesting because it's them coming together resurfaces these old unhealed family wounds and they play it all out again. And then, both of their lives essentially get turned upside down and And then, of course, when you read it, you'll find out how it ends, but it is in a tragedy.
Yeah. Well, I thought that the way you brought the confessional in and how that really narrated the story, I was just fascinated by that. I thought
could see it.
Was great.
Been there.
Oh,
good
that's
imagery.
So cool. Oh, that's so great. Yes. Oh, I love to hear that. It's interesting because I've never been in a confessional. I've never had that experience. I did research it. I actually took a class from a Catholic priest about confession. And so I did some of that.
You did well. It felt real.
And of course, I think, there's one way to show confession, but we've all done it. We've all just told the truth, these terrible, sad truths to a confidant, a best friend, all those things. And so the emotional part was very easy for me to dive into. But of course, it did take some research with understanding Catholicism.
And I do want to go back to the tarot card readings. I also read that you do tarot card readings. And I'm just curious, how does someone learn to do that?
Oh, yes. Well, it's a really interesting story because I had a fascination with learning tarot and had purchased a tarot card deck actually at Pike Place Market in Seattle, and just kind of held on to it and was waiting to figure out how to use them. It's a bit daunting, at least it was for me. And I happened to move next door to a tarot school.
Huh.
And when I say tarot school, it was a woman and it was her house, but she was offering tarot classes. And so I studied tarot with her. And so I got to really understand it. And I did offer tarot readings for a while. I don't anymore. I'll use them for myself or family on occasion. But as it pertains to dead daddy issues, I was just really interested in taking that dynamic and the ideas of fate and how much power we have over our lives and how we can give our power away and all of that. So I just find tarot to be really interesting.
Well, we wondered what inspired Leah.
Yeah, a little bit of me.
A little bit of you, yeah.
A little bit. I think it's always like that. You write what you know, but she's not me.
Okay.
But I certainly pulled from my life. Yeah.
So let's talk about Sadie for a second. Oh my
Ooh.
Goodness. How fun.
And Lainey's like, she was so fun. I was like, fun? Well, she was fun. She thinks she must have been very fun to create.
Fun to write about, yes.
Yes, I think Sadie would have been fun. I think she is fun. That's her only real attribute.
That's all she knew.
That's all she knew, and she is fun. And yeah, I mean, Sadie's the archetype of the femme fatale. And I wanted to create an experience in Leah's life of a friendship that she had that she felt very strong with. Like she had a support system that would never betray her. I wanted her to have that since her family was so in upheaval. And then I thought, well, now Sadie needs to betray Leah. She needs to do it in a very dramatic way that undermines the very safety, the only safety that Leah feels like she has.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where Sadie, was born. And, and on top of that too, I just want to share that when I chose her name, sometimes name picking is the hardest thing, because
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, because as an author, you want to convey a certain feeling that may already exist to the reader. So you have to be thoughtful, at least I was, about very popular names or, if it's attached to a celebrity or that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went with Sadie because of the Beatles song. And so that's where her name was born from. So it was kind of this whole idea of, this femme fatale woman she's going to cause some trouble.
Yeah. Yes, she
Yes,
did.
she did.
Great character development, by the way.
Oh, thank
Very
you.
well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, you told us in the beginning, Leia is at her father's funeral, and we know right away that Sadie's there with something. Something has happened, and we know that.
Yes.
It just created such tension throughout the whole book that you just had to keep turning the pages because I kept thinking, okay, is this it? Is this it? And so, yeah, that was great.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yes, I tried for that, and it's such a balance of what to give away and what to hold back. You know, and you want to keep the reader turning the pages. Anyway, so I'm glad that you felt that way. That's amazing. I would like to talk a little bit about the character Madeline.
Absolutely.
Even though Sadie was so incredible, I was obsessed with Madeline's character. And I just want to say she was, for me, the most fun to write.
Oh,
That is good to know. Yes. We didn't see her much, it
Right.
didn't seem like.
Yeah, she wasn't in there much, but in my mind, she was a mixture of Angelica Houston and my real life mother.
oh.
And so it was really fun to just make her really quirky and, focused on her things like feng shui and that sort of thing. So I had just such a kick writing her. So that was really fun.
Sure.
Well, did you have any really big surprises or challenges when writing this book?
Well, because it was really my first time from start to finish, I felt like everything was a surprise and a challenge.
Yeah.
It truly was. But I would say that the editing process took so much longer than I understood it might. And it always felt like the goalpost was moving, It's like you could see the light at the end of the tunnel and then it just kept going further and further away.
Yeah.
So now I have a clear understanding of what that would be like, through my next books.
Okay, you got to tell us though, the next book, sequel?
There is the potential for a sequel. I definitely have all of the details of it, if you will, a really strong outline, kind of like what we were talking about before. I didn't expect it actually with Dead Daddy Issues. I thought it was done. And I was really surprised to just have this random download of inspiration come to me about what will happen to the Sparks family in 3 years and the consequences of their choices. And I thought, oh, yes, there's something really amazing here that could still be told. And so
I would 100% read it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I don't want to give too much away, but there's more here, which is really exciting. But it wasn't ever my original plan.
Well, it is exciting. So, well, we do have some rapid fire questions we thought might be fun. If you are up for that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so I get the first one.
Okay.
Reading on a beach or in a cabin in the mountains?
In a cabin in the mountains.
Me too.
For sure.
How about a bookmark? What do you use to mark your place?
Well, you know what? I made some of my own bookmarks, but even now I use anything that's within arm's reach.
Oh, yeah.
I'll use a business card, folded Kleenex. If I'm in the mood, I'll dog ear the page. I'll use a family photo. Right now I'm using Christmas cards because I have so many active bookmarks. So.
Okay, drink of choice while you're writing.
Oh, while I'm writing, always coffee. Although I did find that a little bit of Prosecco while editing has been very good for me.
So when do you feel most inspired to write? Morning or night?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough question because both can be true for me. I would say that I'm most inspired when I have freedom to daydream.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a morning or night thing for me. For me, it's more about, do I have time to go for a walk in the forest? Am I going on a drive somewhere? Like driving for me, I get so much inspiration just because I have the space to daydream. But when it comes to writing, I would say when I'm doing the first draft, it's first thing in the morning I start. But with editing, I like to do it in the afternoons.
So you said possible sequel working on. Are you working on anything else?
I am. I have another book as well. I've got them outlined, but I haven't pulled the trigger on which one to start first. And this one is unrelated, also a novel, of course, and it's set in the Seattle area, and it'll have some, I would say, tech characters as well, which is a bit new for me to bring into it. But I don't want to give too much away because
Sure.
even if I say the name, it'll just be too out there. You know, these things are delicate in their early stages, but
Yep. Got to keep your secrets.
yes. And I did publish a novelette right after I wrote Dead Daddy Issues and published it. And that's available now. It was completely unplanned, and it's about 11,000 words. So it's a short read. That one follows a man named Charlie who's going through a hard time. He is not sure if he wants to continue living. He's got 1 week left, he's decided, and he wants to spend it doing a week of good deeds. And so that's the title for that, 1 week of good deeds. And it's in a dirty realism style, which is kind of a Raymond Carver is most famous for. And you'll hear Bukowski in that genre as well. So that was a fun one to write.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about yourself or about Dead Daddy Issues or anything that we didn't cover?
I would just encourage anyone who has a joy of writing, a passion for it, who's drawn to it, to never give up if you don't like your first draft, because don't do what I did for 20 years. Yes, keep going to the finish line because it's such a process, but it's so worth it.
Well, Corrin, we thank you so much for spending time with us today.
And remember us when that next book comes out.
I will. Thank you. Thank you both so much, Leisha and Lainey, for having me. It's just been so fun to be talking with you today, and really kind of pulling apart the details of the book is really fun.
How fun was that? That was super cool.
It was, and we're not done yet. We invited 2 friends from our book club to read the book with us and share their thoughts.
We were so excited when we found out that we were going to get this interview with the author, and we thought maybe getting a couple of our friends' views of the book might be kind of fun.
So we asked Tracy to read this book with us, and she did it.
I did. It was a great book. I was hooked from the very beginning, and I was just ready to just keep turning the pages. I read it fairly quickly. Sometimes with having a busy schedule with kids, I don't get to read as often as I would like or as quickly as I'd like to read a book. But this one, I just kept picking it back up and picking it back up. The story is very relatable because of the family dynamics. And so I think that kept me reading it too, because it seemed realistic. I really enjoyed Leia's character because she was real. She had flaws and you could relate to her. You could understand what she was going through. It was very emotional. It was heart-wrenching in some parts, but there was funny parts in it too. I enjoyed the I guess imagery maybe is what I'm looking for, that word. I could picture like the lake house when she talked about going for a swim in the evening, in the description of the house that they actually lived in, their family home. Like I could picture those rooms, like the great room they kept referring to. I could get those mental pictures in my head from the way she described them. So I appreciated that. I have a couple of quotes. She says, "What I know is goodbyes are impossible. They always fall short." And that was relatable. She says, "I'd pick you as my dad all over again." And I was in tears, like I'm almost already in tears again, because my dad was a real rebel. So I can relate to her and her seeing her dad have some of those flaws. That's maybe why I picked this other quote out of the book. It was on page 115. And it said, maybe all of us are doing the best we can with what we've got. And that was a point where she was speaking to the priest about her dad. One of the things the priest said was that no human is perfect. I appreciated that. It was really good. I enjoyed it. I would definitely read something else from this author again.
We sure appreciate you, first of all, saying yes to reading the book, but I'm so glad you also enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Yes,
and we love
yes.
having you share your thoughts.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for suggesting the book.
And we also have Angela. We are super excited to hear your thoughts about this book, Dead Daddy Issues.
It was an interesting one, yes.
What can you tell us about it?
It was one that kept me turning the pages. It was definitely very entertaining. It was one I couldn't necessarily find myself in any of those characters' shoes, but it was a fun story to to read and to think, oh my gosh, this poor lady, does that many bad things actually happen to somebody? And it would be one I think would be fun to do as a book club, just because the discussion it would generate would really, I think, spark some interesting conversation and have some humor and maybe a little controversy to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Angela. So you would recommend this book?
I would, yes.
Listeners, go grab your copy of Dead Daddy Issues. It's such a good read.
Until next time, everyone, I'm Leisha.
And I'm Lainey. And keep those bookmarks bouncing.